Very good. Very good. Thank you. Ms. Overman, you've worked with a lot of federal agencies. Which ones do this well, and what kind of cultures and management structures do they have?
You know, it's interesting. As you mentioned, I worked with the U.S. Digital Service. I think USDS is probably the best example I can think of. And I think the reason for that is a lot of agencies, again, do not have the internal capacity. And oftentimes what we would see at USDS is the teams would get called in when a crisis point had hit. I think a lot of agencies really struggle with this. We are seeing a growing number of digital services teams evolve across agencies. I think, as mentioned, I believe DoD is further along. I think DHS is further along in having enough digital service capacity to do these things on their own without having to rely on that external support. And I think the interesting thing about DHS is not only do they have a lot of very good and deep internal technology expertise, they also have a very large customer experience office. And we've seen those two things in combination, the digital service engineering product development expertise plus customer engagement experience to be a pretty potent model. It is
More like the private sector does.
Exactly.
They focus on customer service.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Ms. Overman, how do agencies get in trouble when they buy commercial off-the-shelf software, as the VA has done with the Cerner EHR and the CGI Momentum financial systems?
You know, it's interesting. I think, again, I feel like a little bit of a broken record here. If you start with end users from the beginning, it is entirely possible that a commercial off-the-shelf system could work. But you have to be very careful in understanding exactly what those COTS systems are offering and does it fit with what you're trying to solve for. There are some downsides to COTS regardless of the fit. One, it really only works if the agency is capable of adjusting its process and workflow to meet the COTS system. And two, in a lot of these systems, you end up paying for functionality that you don't actually need because you're buying the full package as opposed to having a customized response. I do think, you know, generally speaking, what I have seen is you don't want to be absolute about anything. There are certainly use cases where having a COTS system might actually be the fastest and easiest way to solve for problems. However, if you are dealing with what a lot of agencies deal with, which is a user base that is not common in the private sector or is not fully met by private sector technology, and you need customization, that's where the product model becomes very helpful because you have the internal experts who can guide a number of different vendors towards meeting the actual end needs. So if there's any customization at all, you really don't want to go with COTS. And the other challenge with COTS system, frankly, is a lot of the contracts mean that you don't necessarily have access to the code, so you can't modernize it yourself. Okay. So even if it's fit for purpose at the time of acquisition, 3 to 5 years down the road, you're now stuck with a system that you can't change.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Schweikart, do you think that the electronic health record modernization program reflects an agile, incremental, or modular approach?
I'm not sure it reflects any of those. I think that the challenge is how to create an incremental or modular approach. And if I could touch back on one of your comments in your opening statement, Mr. Chairman, about underinvestment in infrastructure, we talk about modular approach, but you need the plumbing or the architecture so that these different pieces can be installed easily. You know, that the door frames are a standard size so you can buy another door or a different door. And so, you know, with where they are with this system, with the electronic health records modernization system, can they fully validate the requirements with small groups of users? You know, a test lab would be helpful, but in my mind, the key milestone is they've actually got all of the functionality implemented once, which means that the other centers can come and look at it and say, so this is what we're going to go do.
Right.
And we're not going to mess around every time we come to another center and say, oh, we need to change this because I like, you know, vanilla instead of chocolate ice cream. But they've actually done enough exploration and enough validation and enough demonstration, really, you know, in the real world, this really works, and we can roll it out rapidly to the remaining centers.
Makes sense. As a matter of fact, I am sure that you all can go back to the statements that I made going back as long as 3 years ago. We want to have a fully functional system at one facility before we start rolling it out in others. I've used my time, and I think that you're all finished with this panel. Okay. This panel is excused from the witness table. I want to thank you all so much for coming in today and taking the time to answer questions for the committee. And we're going to go ahead and switch out the next panel. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next panel as everybody is switching up so that we can utilize this time as efficiently as possible.